In May of 2012, we got the film Dark Shadows, directed by Tim Burton, starring Johnny Depp, which was a good movie. I liked it. But I knew there was more to it. I knew it was inspired by a classic TV series from the 60s, which my mother watched in her youth, which is how I knew of it. So after I saw the movie, I thought, you know what? I should actually watch the original series. And since only Hulu, Netflix, and YouTube only had a handful of episodes, I thought I might as well just fork over the money and get the complete series box set, which I did. And I watched all 1,125 episodes. But I did not stop there. I watched the original films in the 70s, I watched the revival in 1990, and I also researched the 2004 revival, and as well rewatched the 2012 movie. So, instead of just reviewing it all in one video and not wasting your time, I thought, why not just do it in little sections? So join me in the 6-part video of reviewing the entire franchise of Dark Shadows. Thank you. Enjoy. Before actually getting into the review, I thought I should actually define what a soap opera really is, because, well, not many people know really the definition of one. And, but if anybody has seen a soap opera or seen a parody of one, we can kind of give our own definition of what one is. My definition of a soap opera is man A is married to woman A. Man A is in a sexual relationship with woman B, and woman B is married to man A, and woman A is in a relationship with man C, and they each have their own secrets and trying not to get the other one to know that they're having an affair with one another, and when they do, they shoot each other, kill each other, or just blackmail them, or whatever, you know, some of them even just spy on Overwatch. But, that's my basic definition of soap opera. But, let's see. But, Wikipedia actually has a better definition of it. And Wikipedia says it is an ongoing episodic work of dramatic fiction presented in serial format. What really defines a soap opera is the open-ended nature of the narrative, with stories spanning several episodes. One defining feature that makes a program a soap opera, according to Albert Moran, is that form of television that works with a continuous open narrative. Each episode ends with the promise that the storyline is to be continued in another episode. What also makes a program a soap opera is that storylines run concurrently, intersect, and lead into further developments. Oftentimes, storylines will share an episode that may interconnect and affect one another, or may run entirely independent of each other. Sometimes an episode will just continue on one storyline. Storylines do not often end at the same time, but when one storyline ends, sometimes before they end, another begins. Each episode ends on a cliffhanger with the promise the story will dissolve or continue in another episode. Soaps are generally about romantic relationships between people, affairs, real-life problems, murder, revenge, espionage, life, death, etc., etc. Dark Shadows actually had all of those pretty much in its earlier episodes before it became a gothic horror, because the beginning was just a gothic romance story. It was a thriller. But even in the beginning, when it was just a gothic thriller soap, it seemed to be different than all others. And that's one of the things that caught my attention. Now let's actually get into the review of it. And I thought I'd just go, I won't get into it with the story yet, but I just thought I'd just talk about some of the other things of the show. The tone and mood of the genre. With this show, they set out to make a gothic soap. There is a large, dark, dusty old mansion built in the late 1700s, filled with dark corridors, cobwebs, statues, paintings of ancestors, and actual antiques. Shadows were used a lot of the sets to scare, and lightings were used to set the mood. This was actually one of the first things that attracted me to the show, and just the way it looked and its genre. I mean, in the beginning, you know, like I said, it was a thriller, and then later it became a horror, supernatural. It was different than all others. And before the supernatural characters and storylines came, Dark Shadows, like I said, was just a thriller, starting with stories of just revenge and murder. Let's see. forgive me, I have notes. Since this series is a long series, I wrote down everything I could on notes, and this is my note paper for the entire series. The entire franchise, sorry. Characters. What also caught my attention was with the show, or are the characters. Each one over time became more drawn out. They weren't just simple. They became more drawn out over time. Some you liked, some you just hated. Roger Collins in particular, at first I hated. You know, he was just a pompous prick. I just wanted to punch him. But then later becomes somebody you like. In fact, Barnabas Collins in the beginning was actually just a villain. He was killing people left and right, and he slowly but surely became the hero and the and the main character of the series. And that's because they just wanted to do something different with him, because they made him a more sympathetic vampire, a reluctant vampire. And he's actually the first in history to be the first reluctant vampire. Without him, we probably wouldn't have Anne Rice's classic, Vampire Chronicles, or, God forbid, Twilight. Anywho, but if I had just jumped into the Barnabas Collins episodes, because Barnabas Collins didn't come until like episode 210. We had the first 209 episodes without Barnabas Collins, and if I had just jumped into 210, because things were episode 210 was in the middle of another storyline going on, and if I just started there, I wouldn't have cared for what was going on with the other characters. I wouldn't be sympathetic to them at all. But when I started watching from episode 1, I started caring about each of these characters, and particularly Victoria Winters, I liked and then eventually fell in love with her character. Not just love, like, oh my god, I like this character so much. I mean, emotionally fell in love with this character. I just wanted to make sure she got out of everything. I didn't want her to get hurt. She was getting the girl that she was the kind of like my ideal girl in a way. So I kind of liked her for that. And it's just, you get emotionally involved with these characters. In fact, some people, these characters became real to them. It's strange. One of these things the show is known for is acting. I'm not saying it's great acting. It is cheesy acting, I will admit. The acting is cheesy. But then there is plenty. I mean, there is plenty of it. And that is mainly because they have to do this show in one take. Each episode is one take. And they don't film like one scene in one take and then they edit to another thing. No, the entire episode is one entire take. There's no cutting. It's like filming a live play. They did it, and they memorized their lines on the night before and on the day. So, they didn't really have time to reform their acting. But, it was, for what it was impressive. The actors do seem like they take the roles very seriously, so that the acting, it is passable, it is good. And even times I'm like, wow, there have been times where I've been memorized by their acting. There are plenty of times where it's cheesy, but the acting is good. Once you just get into it, the acting is good. Now there are goofs in the show. The goofs, there is goofs in every single episode. I will tell you. There is not one episode that goes by where an actor has not flubbed a line. And like I said, it's mainly because they learned their lines either the night before and or on the way to the studio the day they filmed it. And you have to admit that it is pretty impressive, because later in the episodes when, there's witches and warlocks and whatnot, people are doing incantations and casting spells. And when they do that, their whole, incantation is like long. It's not simple. It's long, big words, so it's like people are memorizing this on the subway to the studio. And you have to admit, that's pretty impressive, especially with what they're doing, and make it serious and scary and mesmerizing. It's amazing. But yeah, it is understandable they flub a line and looking for the damn teleprompter, because you'll see an actor suddenly forget a line. They're looking for the damn teleprompter over somebody's shoulder to see their next line. But it's there, and it is funny. I mean, you'll see a boom mic come into frame, or a shadow of a boom mic, a shadow of a camera. You'll see a stagehand walk in the background or in front of the camera. The sets will wobble. An effect didn't work at the scheduled time. The scheduled time, didn't go right when it should, or like maybe something falls down, the teleprompter comes into the screen. I mean, there was one time when the characters grabbed a sword off the wall and it was in front of a lamp, and you didn't see it because the camera moved as he was moving to point the sword at somebody else, but you hear an expensive lamp crash to the ground. But it's sad at first. It kind of is still sad throughout the entire series, but eventually, after a couple episodes, those goofs become part of the charm of the show. I don't know why, it just does. And when I was watching it, it was actually fun pointing out those little flaws in each episode, either from an actor flipping a line, you see a cameraman or something, and you look for it, and it just becomes fun. I don't know why, it just became fun. But even then, minus these goofs or whatever, it is actually, once you get past those, it actually is fun to watch the show, and the show just is brilliant, in my opinion. And but even if you do get annoyed by the goofs, one does have to admit that the stories for each episode, or just the episodes themselves, are good. Now, the storylines, I will have to admit there are a lot of storylines. I mean, soap operas, they're ongoing. There's several storylines going on in each year. And that's one of the things that actually really good in the show are the storylines. And it's one of the main reasons why I like the show. What I particularly like is that many of the storylines, the characters are adapted from classic novels. For example, Victoria Winters and her role as governess is inspired by Charlotte Burnett's novel Jane Eyre. Burke Devlin and his motivation for returning is from Alexandre Dumas's novel The Count of Monte Cristo. And I'm not going to, like I said, I'm not going to actually just generalize the entire storyline of the series. I'm actually going to go through each individual storyline. Excuse me. And just give a brief summary of what it is, and then I'm just going to critique the story. And excuse me. And then we'll move on to the next one, and the next one, next one. And it wouldn't take too much time, but it's just that each storyline seems like its own mini movie in a way. So I thought I should just go through each individual one. And the first story is Victoria Winters' parentage. Now, how shall I begin this? Well, as many people would say, how shall I begin this? Like the Bible? I guess I shall start like that. The Bible. In the beginning, a woman is riding a train to the town of Collinsport, Maine, to take up a position of governess at the great house of Collinwood, top Widow's Hill. Her name is Victoria Winters, an orphan with no knowledge of who her parents are, is accepting this job not only to have a career, but to also find out about her past, for she has found evidence that links her past to this state, and will do anything to find out who she is and where she came from. However, her search for her past will intersect with all the troubles and secrets of those who live at Collinwood, and find more than she bargained for. This story was a good starting point. It was a great mystery that showed some good character development for Victoria. However, the story was never resolved in the show, for when it was decided that the show was to become a supernatural show, they dropped this and focused on all the supernatural elements. And this was never resolved in the show. It was actually resolved in a radio show. And it was hinted throughout the storyline that somebody was maybe her parent or something. And we all figured out halfway through the storyline that it's Elizabeth. Elizabeth Collins Stoddard is her mother. We all figured this out, but it was never confirmed 100%. But if you ever asked any of the Alexandra Boltke or Joan Bennett before she died, they would say yes, she was the mother. And then it was confirmed in a radio show, I believe it's called The Return to Collinwood, that they actually made it 100% confirmed. And it would have been nice to see that on the show. She always seemed like a mother figure to Victoria in any way, so it kind of would have been nice to resolve that. The second storyline is Burke Devlin's revenge for his manslaughter conviction. This storyline, Burke Devlin is a man who is a friend of Roger Collins, and one day they were out drinking and they were driving, and somebody got ran over. And it was put on Burke Devlin, who ran over the person who was hit and run. Burke Devlin believed he was innocent, and after spending some time in jail, became a successful businessman, comes back to Collinsport with the same night that Victoria Winters does, and he sets up a rival cannery company, and he plans to destroy the Collins family as well as trying to prove his innocence for the manslaughter charge. But along the way, upon meeting Victoria, he starts to slowly dissolve his plans for destroying the Collins family and gets a love interest in a way. You know, love helps along the way. You know, that cliche. Um, this was an entertaining storyline because it created tension between Burke and the Collins family, particularly Roger Collins. Uh, uh, Burke believed that, like I said, he was innocent and wanted to destroy the Collins family, mainly because of Roger. Throughout this and subsequent storylines, one sees that Roger is a pompous, egotistical, neglectful father and a worthless human being. I really, really wanted somebody to punch him. Burke himself isn't all that great either. You know, you could see him just kind of manipulate people here and there. Um, let's see. However, like I said, being in a relationship, he slowly becomes sympathetic. We get the start of like seeing like people we thought were bad starting to slowly change their ways because of one thing or another. And finally, the whole storyline does come to a successful, satisfying conclusion. I mean, by the end, we finally get to see just Roger go from like thinking high on himself to just being this low person. I mean, he finally, you know, gets put into a corner and admits to Burke that, you know, he framed him. You know, basically that Roger was the person who ran over that person. And it was just real satisfying. I was so glad to see Roger just knocked off his pedestal. It was so good. Third storyline is Roger Collins' mysterious car crash. This again happens in the beginning. Basically, Roger, you know, Burke Devlin wants to have a meeting with Roger, so he has him to meet him at the Blue Whale bar in town. Well, Roger takes his car and starts driving, but once he gets down the hill, he realizes the brakes doesn't work and crashes. He's almost killed, and they realize a part was missing from the brakes. Of course, he blames Burke, and an investigation, you know, everybody thinks it's Burke, but there's some evidence that suggests it wasn't Burke, and that it was actually probably David, Roger's son. And, you know, Roger wanted to actually send David away to a school because, you know, he didn't want to take responsibility for raising the kid. So, you know, David took the piece out of the car. But upon discovering this as a possibility, they make it seem like their handyman took out that part just while fixing up the car and forgot to put it back. So, this was like a short, thrilling story that shows us how Roger's son's David is not all that innocent, and our first hints of like ghosts are being delivered because David says he talks to a ghost periodically, and you know, like I said, because since we get to see how much of a just a brat that David is in these beginning episodes, we see the change in him because with Victoria Winters' presence and her teaching the kid lessons and just being with them and all this, he starts to slowly change to become less of a brat and more of a kind human being because of Victoria Winters throughout the show. But it was kind of just a short thing. Kind of just seemed like it was just a minor subplot. It didn't really mean much. If it wasn't even in the show, it wouldn't make much of a difference. But it did bring in more of like one of my favorite characters, Bill Malloy, which brings us to our another story, the murder of Bill Malloy. The first character I ever cared for in this show is a character named Bill Malloy. Elizabeth Collins' daughter, who's the head of the Collins family, she also is the CEO of the Collins Cannery, but she has locked herself in the Collinwood mansion for 18 years straight. She doesn't leave it at all. Nobody knows why. So she has this manager at the cannery to run things for her, and his name is Bill Malloy, and he does care for her greatly. I mean, if you put two and two together, you would think that Victoria Winters is probably their love child. I mean, it's one of the hints. You gotta admit that. And one day, Bill Malloy is just getting tired of everything. He knows there's proof that to end the dispute between Burke and Roger. And he goes to this painter named Sam Evans, who actually witnessed manslaughter. And he gets all of them he sets up a meeting for all of them at Roger's office at the cannery. Well, Bill Malloy doesn't show up. Everybody else does, but Bill Malloy doesn't. And then eventually he's found dead at the bottom of the Widow's Hill. The waves crashing down on him. And nobody knows who did it. And it's just mystery, mystery, mystery. It was a good, actually thrilling piece. I really liked it. It was very well played out and had a surprising ending and reveal to it. The storyline also reveals the first supernatural character with the ghost of Josette Collins, and it was a very nice reveal when she came out. It was just a painting of her at the old house, and she just after everybody leaves, you see it start glowing a little bit, and then the ghost walks out of the painting and then goes to dance around the house. It was a really good effect, and then we get this once the big reveal. We find out that it's the handyman who killed him because he was trying to protect Elizabeth. He didn't want any more. He didn't want a scandal to occur for her because he also cares for her as well, and he didn't want anything bad to happen. But because all this was crashing in on him, he takes Victoria hostage, and we find out that Josette helps the family. She tells him where Victoria is hidden and where the murderer is, and then Josette actually scares the handyman to death. And it was good, and we actually get to see that there are friendly elements to the show, friendly spirits, but she wouldn't be the only one. And then after that, we come to the next story, the first supernatural storyline, Laura Collins the Phoenix. This one is a funny one. This we meet David's mother, who is the immortal phoenix who dies in a fire and is reborn again, a human being that periodically burns herself and then comes back alive. But this time she wants to be burnt with her son. This was interesting. It was nice to see a little witch storyline going on. And it was very mysterious, and again, you get to see how Josette tries to help the family and get them to see what's going on. And it was good, but it was just by the end, the climax just wasn't. It was kind of a letdown. Yes, it was an entertaining storyline. It was good, different pace from what was going on. It was a good supernatural thriller. It was good to see some fire effects, for a show that was interesting. But at the end, it was just the struggle to get David away from her. It just didn't seem all that great. And it just seemed anticlimactic, but by the end, it was a good show. It was just the only downer was the climax at the end. But it did have good cliffhangers and a good story. And the final story we have for this section is the Jason McGuire blackmails Elizabeth Collins-Stoddard. This story, we finally get to find out why Elizabeth Collins-Stoddard has locked herself up for 18 years. She basically murdered her husband, Paul. And this man, Jason McGuire, was Paul's friend, and Elizabeth had him help her get rid of the body. Jason actually hid the body in the basement of the house. And basically he gets his payment and then leaves, but then 18 years later he comes back and decides to blackmail her. And this story leaks over into past 210, but at the start of it, it's the early 200s. And it had a lot of good actors and a lot of kind of somewhat good tense moments, but it was just a story that went on too long. It had a good end, kind of a gratifying ending with him being killed, but it just went on too long and not much was going on. I mean, he was staying at the house, he was getting money from her, he's trying to squeeze as much as possible out of her, but he wasn't it seemed like doing much to really harm the family. It wasn't really going anywhere, which is why they used this to kind of start something else up, because with this, it introduced it led us into the Barnabas Collins storyline, because it introduced to us Jason McGuire's friend Willie Loomis, who was trying to, get some money from Jason McGuire as well, because he was his friend and helping him out or something. But he started wanting to steal the family jewelry and became interested in the rumored buried jewels of Naomi Collins. And when he went looking for those jewels, he stumbles upon a secret room in the family mausoleum where a chained-up coffin lies, and he opens it, letting out a vampire who has been chained out for 171 years. And that was a good start. And of course, the story leads in, like I said, leads in further into the series. And it did have a satisfying conclusion. It had a good climax, and we find out that Elizabeth didn't actually kill her husband. She just knocked him out while he was trying to steal from her because he was going to leave her. And then, Jason just covered up, make it look like she killed him, when really he just ran away. And it was good, but like I said, it just went on for too long. That's a problem with some of the things in the show. Every once in a while, sometimes the storyline just went on for too long. But they still do good stuff and bad stuff. But this is just one of the kind of storylines that probably should have just ended like 20 episodes earlier or something like that. Now these earlier, what has been these separate storylines, because these earlier episodes were not released on DVD or VHS until like after the Barnabas Collins episodes were released, because when they first released the home videos, it was released from 210 to 1245. So it was like they didn't release these earlier episodes until after that, and they called those releases Dark Shadows: The Beginning. So you can kind of put all these stories together as what the fans have dubbed as the beginning. And these episodes are kind of, because of that, these episodes are kind of in a way less known and kind of underappreciated. But once they're seen, they're kind of appreciated more, especially in the complete series set, because you can watch it from beginning to end, like I did. But it's mainly because people like the Barnabas Collins episodes a lot more, because that's when the show was really popular and a lot more interesting, and I agree with that. But I do like these beginning episodes. I mean, it's like a nice little, like an old classic gothic romance, or kind of like a Jane Eyre type of thing. It's like an old school film, especially since it was black and white. It kind of gave that German expressionist feel to it. But these episodes do have a charm, and they do set up a good first year of what we kind of call classic that never dies and resurrects time and time again. Speaking of resurrection, let's talk about our next section. Well, actually, let's not talk about it. That'll be the next video. We'll start talking about the famous vampire Barnabas Collins. Of course, damn it, come on. Come on. Damn. Fuck. Ah!